The first thing that I heard that morning was a howling wind blowing through the leaves and in through my window. The cold breeze on my face was refreshing after so many days of this blazing heat wave. I peeled the damp bedsheets from my skin and picked up a pair of shorts from the floor beside my bed. I was getting way too big for these shorts, but my dad still couldn't afford anything new. I debated with myself whether I should put on a shirt, but decided it was still too hot to wear anything else. After getting semi-dressed, I made my way over to the window and climbed out onto the garden shed. The roof creaked louder than I was used to, but it could still hold my weight. I made my way to the edge and lowered myself down onto a stack of crates that my dad persistently told me to stop climbing on. He wouldn't find out. He always slept way into the afternoon on a Saturday, especially after a bottle of whiskey. I had promised Victoria that I would meet her at the river near her house. The sun was still quite low in the sky, so I knew I had time to grab a bar of chocolate at Mr. Thompson's corner shop. Before I entered the shop, I double-checked my left pocket to feel the change I had left over from yesterday's school dinner money. I never ate dinner on a Friday. "Right on time, Tommy," Mr. Thompson greeted me as the bell above the door rang twice. I smiled and made my way over to the sweets. After grabbing 2 bars of chocolate wrapped in foil, I approached the counter where Mr. Thompson waited patiently. "You keep buying all this chocolate, Tommy, and you're going to be digging yourself into an early grave," Mr. Thompson told me for the 100th time this year. "It's not all for me," I told him. He never believed me. "You can fool yourself all you want, Tommy." I handed him the change. "Now have yourself a pleasant morning." I waved goodbye as I left the shop. It usually took me half an hour to walk to Victoria's house. When I reached the river where we usually met, she was already stood there awaiting my arrival. "Have you got any chocolate?" she shouted in the wind as I approached her. "Right here," I replied as I pulled the 2 bars out from my right pocket and raised them in the air. She was wearing the same thing she wore every day, a murky white dress that looked older than my nan, but she never wore any shoes. I tried to hand her the chocolate, but she always refused to take it until we got to the den. It wasn't far from her house. "Did you learn anything new at school?" she asked as we began to walk by her house. It was a big house, but it looked even older than her dress. Most of the windows were boarded up with planks of wood and the roof had collapsed at the back. "Not much. Talking about school was just as boring as being there, but Victoria always liked to ask. Her parents were quite old-fashioned and didn't let her go to school." In the short time that it took to get to the den, the wind had quickly developed into a storm. The only way inside was through a tiny gap in the rocks, the perfect size for myself and Victoria, but not big enough for anyone older than 10 to climb through. We quickly climbed inside to take shelter from the sudden rain. Victoria went first, and I followed behind. As my hands reached the ground inside the cave, an unexpected surge of wind pushed me so hard that I rolled out of the crawl space and landed on my back. My right leg smashed painfully on a rock. Fortunately, that was all. "You okay?" Victoria asked. "I think so. My leg hurt, but not much." I felt my way through the darkness until I found my dad's old lighter. After lighting a few candles so that we could see, I managed to stand, being careful not to put too much pressure on my right leg. "Chocolate?" Victoria asked, already too deep inside the cave to see anything more than a silhouette. I pulled a bar out of my pocket and threw it in her direction. "Thanks," she added. A sudden sound of crashing rocks emerged from outside of the cave. Before I even had a chance to feel the ground shake beneath my feet, I could see that the hole Victoria and I had climbed through was no longer there. It had been blocked. "What just happened?" I shouted to Victoria but got no reply. I could no longer see her silhouette behind the candlelight. I carefully picked up one of the candles I had just lit and slowly walked a little deeper inside the cave. "Victoria," I tried again. Now is not the time for games. I had never liked the dark. Victoria always tried to get me to go deeper inside the cave, but I couldn't handle the thought of being surrounded by so much darkness. "Victoria," I tried one last time before stepping further than I had ever been. "Are you there?" She never replied. The cave was silent. A disturbing sense of isolation began to overwhelm me as I looked around for Victoria. Then I saw, underneath a pile of unopened chocolate bars wrapped in foil, rested the skeleton of a little girl. She was wearing a murky white dress and had no shoes, just like Victoria.